Welcome to everyone who's here. We will get going in about 2 or 3 minutes here.
So the new article, the new issue is really good. It's got a lot on cover crops.
Yeah,
When you
no,
you
I,
it's probably the most. I mean, when you said it's going to be an issue on cover crops, it really did. I mean, almost all the articles in there are on cover crops.
yeah, sometimes I'm working on it for weeks in advance, and sometimes you think, oh, well, I don't know how this is going to come together. But the one I'm reviewing at the end, it almost always is like, oh, this is pretty good stuff. There's a lot of, and some issues there's more relating to the actual topic than other times, but this time it really did turn out that way. So, welcome again to the folks who are just signing in. We got another minute or two, and we'll get going. If you do have a question, see in the bottom of your Zoom, there's this little Q&A button. So if you click on that, you can enter your Q&A in there. That would be great. And you should be able to chat as well. I'm just going to put in the link for, make sure I get that right. The link for our conference coming up here.
So the people who were not able to attend, this is going to be posted.
Yes, it'll be up on YouTube within a day or two, and we'll email the link out to everybody. So,
I
all
think
right. Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
I think there's a lot of interest, though. Some people will catch it later.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm going to probably put part of this as a transcript into the December issue, which everyone will receive at our conference. So, all right. Well, welcome to those who are here. My name is Paul Meyer. I'm the editor of Acres USA magazine. It's a privilege to have you with us for this webinar and to have Steve Diver here. Steve is um, he is the director of the University of Kentucky's Horticultural Research Farm. He's also worked as an extension agent and with ATRA for a number of years. Um, and Steve was the winner last year of our EcoAg Achievement Award for Acres USA. We award that every year at our conference. And just a quick plug for that, our EcoAg, our 50th EcoAg conference will be this December 1 through 4 in Madison, Wisconsin. I dropped that. Oh, it looks like I only sent it to the host and panelists. I'll resend that to everyone. Uh, so you got the address for that. This is being recorded and we will put it on YouTube and we'll send the link out to everyone. The format here will be Steve's going to present for about 20-30 minutes, and then we'll have time for Q&A. And just FYI, this presentation is a teaser for a shortened version of the presentation he's going to be doing at the conference in December. So if you are interested in this topic of biophysics and structured water in agriculture, there will be much more from Steve and from others at the conference. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Steve.
All right. Hello, everybody, and thanks, Paul, for the introduction. So yeah, this is a teaser for the lecture I'm going to be doing at the conference in December on this topic on biophysics and structured water in agriculture. And so this is an abbreviated version, and what I will do at the conference will be more in depth, but this gives you an introduction. So this is going to be, let's see, it's going to be 54 years of eco-agriculture. It's going to be, since the magazine started, it's going to be the 50th conference and trade show. So I've been attending, let's see, let me get this. So there it is. Okay. So I've been attending for a long time. I've been first conference I went to was in 1985. I've been working in ag a long time, and so the first few slides, I want to give an introduction to what is eco-agriculture, how does that fit in the context of Acres USA? And it was founded by Charles Walters, who was an ag journalist. The magazine was founded in 1971. That's 54 years ago. And his version of his way of describing eco-agriculture is that it's farming systems that have to be economic and ecological. So uh, there's been a big influence from Acres has spilled off onto the Eco Farm Conference in Asilomar, and then the Bionutrient Food Association that Dan Kittredge runs, and also Advancing Eco-Agriculture that John Kempf runs. So there's been a big influence on that. And also to help put in perspective is that we have this concept around pioneers in eco-agriculture and standing on the shoulders of giants. A farmer actually asked me to put this slide together. So this helps to, think about some of the pioneers like Weston A. Price and William Albrecht and Kerry Reams and Maynard Murray and people, Bargila Rativer, Phil Callahan, Elaine Ingham, Don Huber, and then a whole bunch of teachers and consultants who teach at the conference, put on seminars, and publish articles and books. So you'll see a lot of familiar faces on there. John Kemp, Dan Kittredge, Mark Shepard, and then other people like Siegfried Uta Lubke, Edwin Blosser, all kinds of people like Neil Kinsey and Arden Anderson and Gary Zimmer. So if that helps. And then, so in I'd been attending Acres for 15 years, and they asked me to do kind of a keynote in front of a large audience on an eco-farming primer, and I thought about it. And while Charles was talking about economic and ecological farming, I was thinking about what are the big topics that these pioneers and consultants talk about. And so from a practical sort of agronomic point of view, how do you frame that for farmers? Is that I describe this as the three pillars of eco-agriculture are minerals, biology, and energy. And so that this is like you hear all about sophisticated soil testing and mineral balancing and remineralization, and a whole bunch is on biology. And then the third one is on bioenergetics or biophysics. And none of these stand alone. Some people like to say, hey, all you need is the biology, you can do everything. But no, the way that eco-agriculture works is that the three pillars work together better than just one thing alone. So if that helps put that into perspective. And we're going to explore this third pillar today. And so, yeah, so the other thing is that, there's a saying you should learn how to play classical before you play jazz. And so this would be like the classical version of eco-agriculture is all this emphasis on really sophisticated soil testing and mineral balancing. And a lot of these famous consultants and authors like Gary Zimmer and Neil Kinsey, also Dan Scow, and some older guys like William Albrecht and Don Schiefer, and then Victor A. Tesians. So um, and then in the early, let's see, way back in like 1990 or something like that, when I was working for ATRA, I put together the Alternative Soil Testing Laboratories resource list because farmers were asking us, hey, where can I get a good soil sample for my organic farm? It's a little different from the university soil test. And so this is another way that you can frame that is labs that emphasize microbial and humus, and then other labs that emphasize chemistry and minerals. There's a whole bunch of them on there. So like I said, you learn how to play classical, then you play jazz. So it's an old saying. So in the Acres experience, there's been a number of different themes on bioenergetics. For example, Kerry Reams is well known for the RBTI, or the Reams Biological Theory of Ionization. Ehrenfried Pfeiffer was published in a lot of the early issues on the biodynamic preparations and so forth. Galen Hieronymus and his wife used to be at the trade show many years ago, and he got into radionics and cosmic pipes. Phil Callahan is really well known for his work on paramagnetism and towers of power. Hugh Lovell is really well known for quantum agriculture and these field broadcasters. And so on. You have Arden Anderson and Phil Wheeler. The books on biomagnetism by Albert Roy Davis and Walter C. Rawls are really well known. So, and in the trade show, you'll see things on agrohomeopathy and radionics, the Lahovsky multi-wave oscillator, various things on structured water and scalar energy and electroculture, that sort of thing. So it's been around, but it's still the lesser known and lesser explored. Let's put it that way, of the three. And you really need the foundation of the first two to really, create the foundation of a healthy agriculture system. These do not substitute for good soil management and good carbon soil management and mineral balance. And then, yeah, there's a whole bunch of different books that you can get out of the Acres USA bookstore by, again, Arden Anderson and Hugh Lovell, Phil Callahan, and so forth. So, yeah, it's been around, and they get into all these different topics. So that just helps put into perspective a quick introduction to frame eco-agriculture and how bioenergetics fits into that framework. And so I'm going to borrow a terminology from Paul Babcock, who was an innovator, inventor in Spokane, Washington, and he referred to this as beneficial field technology. And what he said is that beneficial field technology is a broad category that encompasses and describes devices and technologies that use energy of some kind that interacts with biology for beneficial purposes. And these include things like magnetic force, electrostatic force, electromagnetic energy, light and biophoton emissions, orgone and etheric field interactions. All have been used to improve health and vitality of living beings. So so that gets down to quantum agriculture and holistic health. And you get into terms like bioresonance and biofield, biophotons, pulse electromagnetic frequency, scalar energy, scalar waves, torsion fields, plasma. Some of the old terms are like etheric and prana and ki from 5,000 years ago, but the term that really is used in modern science is actually biofield, describes the same thing. And essentially, it says there's like software behind the hardware, and that these information or these energy fields serve as information to guide formation of matter and how things work. So if that helps, it's the software behind the hardware. And essentially, they're all about increasing the energetic vitality of living systems. And the modalities include a lot of different scalar devices, different pendants and plates and coils, ormus, minerals, agrohomeopathy, the biodynamic preparations, radionics, seed treatments with various devices, whether it's pyramid or orgone or magnetic, vortex and structured water, and various geometrical shapes and structures and biomagnetism. All these are part of this topic. So in the 70s, these were a couple influential books that influenced my generation and got a lot of us interested in this. The Secret Life of Plants by Peter Tompkins and Christopher Bird. And so that got into ESPN plants, vocal crystals, the Lahovsky, Kirlian, auras, all those kinds of things. And then the other one was Cleve Baxter's work with biocommunication in plants and living cells. And that's where he used biofeedback devices to measure the sensitivity of plants. So that gets into extrasensory perception, life force energy, the biofield, quantum non-locality, and speeds faster than light, than tachyon. So if that helps. And then this was interesting. Now this guy is a real solid professor of anatomy at Yale University who started working what he calls L fields or life fields, fields of life. And what he did was he measured micro voltage in different organisms and figured out that these bioelectrical gradients serve as blueprints or guide the morphogenesis, just like I said, the software behind the hardware. So with this, he was able to detect early detection of cancer. He could detect hybrid vigor in sweet corn by measuring the microvoltage of the seeds themselves, and so forth. So that was really helpful to look back and see how some of this has come about. And in modern times, people have resurrected this whole concept around electroculture, which was really big in Europe in the 1920s. And there's all kinds of devices out there now, but this takes into this concept that there's a gradient of energy between the atmosphere and the earth. And then if you can, it's like a passive thing. You just get the energy, it flows through the system, and it increases the vitality. And they're really into these giant vegetables. So that was really a good indicator that something's working. And so in modern times, there's various people who are pioneering this and selling devices and teaching farmers and getting interesting results. This one is on a Facebook page, Electroculture, Magnoculture by Yannick Van Doorn. And there's some other people that are doing all this. So that helps just to put in a real brief introduction to biophysics and bioenergetics. Now let's talk about structured water. So some of the key points are that water has dozens of anomalous properties and responds to environmental influences. Now we know that water can exist in phases like liquid, solid, and gas phases like water, ice, or steam. But now there's also this recognition that there's a fourth phase of water, and that is that in cells, in living cells, water exists as exclusion zone water or easy water next to membranes, next to DNA and organelles. And it excludes different solutes from that. That's how it got the name. But in the process, it creates a negative charge and can store and transfer energy. So it has really interesting properties. Gerald Pollack is the researcher in Washington who has figured all this out. And then in general, water responds to electromagnetic frequencies and can store and transmit information. A lot of this has been done in European research. And then structured water occurs when hydrogen and oxygen atoms cluster into geometrical arrangements, which enhances its properties in biological systems. So all of this, they're known variously depending on which person or you're following or which technology you're following. It's known as hexagonal water, activated water, magnetized water, vitalized water, coherent water, informed water, imprinted water, and potentized water. And they're not all the same. They have slightly different uses and contexts, but they're all, alluding to something similar. So let's just take it as an example, some of the work that's been done in biodynamic agriculture. This is, like I said, it was really common in early years of Acres USA magazine to have articles on biodynamics. And so this is the preparations. This is the BD 500 or the horn manure. And really, it's really much more practical than what people make it out to. This kind of a horn manure has a big influence on humus formation. And so it also talks about the calcium influence. It promotes more lateral growth. It enlivens the soil and so forth. I have a boatload of indigenous microorganisms. The BD501 or the horn silica, this one has more of a silica influence. It promotes more upright growth, and it also has indigenous microorganisms. But what's interesting is how you stir that. And so this was a curious thing that Rudolf Steiner came up with, is stirring the preparations in water, creating a vortex in one direction and stopping and going back in the other direction. So that's called dynamization or potentization. And so this work really ties back to Victor Schauberger. And this actually is like a peasant farmer practice in Europe. This is where this came from. And what the point is that water has the ability to pick up information. And so it can pick up the imprint of the BD preparations. And when you put it out onto the land, it carries that information out there. And so this has been mechanized. There's different people. For example, Steve Storch in New York he's got some vortex machines. They do this. It's really popular in vineyards in both California and Europe to do biodynamics. And so another one is the flow forms. This comes out of the work of John Wilkes, and these are the flow forms that are popular also on biodynamic farms and other places that want to create compost teas and so forth. Is this natural flow of water, how it moves and has rhythms and goes through streams. And this is mimicking that, where it really, this movement vitalizes the water. And again, it can pick up information. So one of the famous researchers in biodynamics was Lily Kalisko. And so she is known for a few things. One of them is this method called capillary dynamolysis, where you use filter paper and you do vertical chromatography. She worked with agrohomeopathy. She would dilute substances in water and she would germinate seeds. And so, in fact, she did thousands of these seed germination trials where she would dilute the substances into homeopathic levels, and then she would observe the growth and germination of seeds based on the dilution. And so these are known as the Kalisko curves. And actually, they're used now in modern homeopathic medicines. So that was really amazing work that was done in the 1920s and 30s and onwards. And so a lot of interesting basis to that. And then in modern times, some of these things that have actually become part of the common knowledge in science and it spread far away from just biodynamics itself. And so one of these studies that did the work on the capillary dynamolysis is the rising picture method. They looked at conventional tomatoes, they looked at organic tomatoes, and they concluded that it is 100% accurate for discriminating between which way they were grown, whether they were fresh or frozen. So that is really interesting. You see this more and more now, is that some of the techniques from biodynamics are used much more widely by everybody. So there's some really well-known work that has been done in this area. Like I mentioned, Victor Schauberger is really well known. His work with implosion, with centripetal and centrifugal forces. Theodore Schwenk's work is really well known with the water droplet method and other books like that. So they go into more detail on these topics, and then different kinds of biocrystallization methods, so forth. And so here's an example. This is some of the flow forms that they were doing research with. And what they found is that, yes, based on the geometric shape and the path curve and the rhythmic movement, just that alone can influence wheat seed germination and seedling growth. And so, yeah, that's what you can see there is the growth of the roots and the shoots just based on the way the water has been moved through these flow forms. And then there's probably the most substantial body of work has been the International Conference on the Physics, Chemistry, and Biology of Water. So there's been many of these that are held in Europe. Some of the most famous scientists in the world working in this field have presented there, and all of this is online, and you can download this. But they've gotten into things like the anomalous properties of water. They've gotten into how, water as an information carrier or the memory of water. And essentially what this does is provide technical support for agrohomeopathy and implosion and water as a carrier of information.
Okay, so that's a good summary of and puts into context what we're talking about. And so now I want to talk about some of the things we've looked into here. As I said, I manage a busy farm. We're managing all kinds of research plots. but I do have done some ancillary research trials to look into some of these structured water devices. And so this is like one of them. This is the Garcia biomagnetism pipe, and just illustrates that you can attach this to a garden hose. You have water comes in, water passes through, comes out, goes through a watering wand. It's a very simple setup. Water responds very quickly, and it can rearrange the molecules and have an influence on cells and so forth. So that's one of them. The other one that we've done, this is the one we have more data on. This one is the superimploder, and that's the one that was designed by Dan Winters. This one features dual action. It has a double vortex nozzle based on golden ratio geometry, and it has powerful magnets inside the PVC pipe. So the water passes through, and it's adaptable to either garden size, and most of these commercial ones for agriculture can go up to 4-inch, 6-inch, or 12-inch irrigation pipes. So what we did a couple trials. So 2023 we did radish and tomatoes, and what we typically do in a pot trial is overplant the seedlings so that we have the final stand count that we want. And so we thin them at 2 weeks. And so this was very interesting because right at the thinning stage, 2 weeks after sowing, you could see these differences. And so we took seedlings, we did the fresh weight, and the treated water, the structured water, was about 34% greater than fresh weight, greater than tap water. And I'm just talking about municipal tap water. And so this is really common. You'll see 20%, 40% greater, biomass weight using these devices. And on this trial, these were the radish roots. We put 4 radish roots per pot, and you could tell the difference just by carrying them into the head house to weigh. And this one, we found about 25% greater fresh weight using structured water, and about 34% greater dry weight using structured water versus just tap water. And that's all we did. That's the only difference. Everything else is the same. And then we did another trial in 2024. Same thing we did. In this one, we were looking, this is the tomatoes. And again, we would thin tomatoes. In this instance, we thinned them 19 days after planting. And again, you could see obvious differences in the seedlings just by how they were watered. And so in this instance, the structured water was about 55% greater fresh weight compared to tap water. So anyways, that gives you a brief summary. We're going to go into this in more detail at the conference in December, and I may put together a handout for that. But just put in perspective, we were talking about eco-agriculture. You got to keep in mind, it has to be practical. So you're not going to be able to substitute and look at structured water and bioenergetics as an input. That's all you need. It's not how it works. The primary fundamental thing is you have to pay attention to carbon farming, soil organic matter, and soil biology, and supplement that with minerals. And then these bioenergetic devices and structured water technology is a supplement, and it helps pull it all together. It's like the silver lining or the icing on a cake. But it can be very helpful in promoting healthy cellular metabolism and living biology. So that's it.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. That's that's great. It's fascinating stuff. Hard to wrap the head around sometimes. Maybe before we even ask any questions, just can you give some thoughts on how we should understand this just philosophically in general? I mean, there's a lot of physics that we probably just don't understand yet, right?
Right. Well, one of the things I wanted to, we've talked about this before, but for farmers, what I think is really helpful is one thing that people can relate to is that, when we're growing vegetables, we know that there are beneficial microorganisms and harmful pathogenic microorganisms. So, we're growing vegetables, we end up with early blight on tomatoes, or we have fusarium. Those are the kind of pathogenic microbes we're trying to avoid, and when things get out of balance. But we have a whole boatload of beneficial microorganisms, bacillus and streptomyces and all these things that have all these beneficial properties. Uh, and so it's the same way with energy. When we're talking about energy, one of the things we want to watch out for is electromagnetic smog. In other words, the Wi-Fi's, the radio frequencies, just, electrical outlets next to your bed. This is kind of electrical smog that you're trying to avoid or you're trying to offset. And then you want to promote these more bioresonance type of frequencies that are naturally occurring in nature. And this is really interesting because you have solar energy, you have geopathic energy, you have the Schumann resonance, you have all these different harmonic energies that are coming from the natural way that the earth and the atmosphere works. Those are the ones that we're taking advantage of. Very, very low frequency kinds of and low voltage, micro voltage. It's not like turning on a light switch. This is just like the natural energies that make up healthy living systems. And really, so when people are living a healthy lifestyle, they feel healthy, they feel energetic. That's all there is to it. I mean, those are that's the way biology works. The point is that we have the ability to use some of these devices to enhance those biofields. So we have different pendants, we have different little scalar plates you can set your water onto, and you can charge that water, and you can measure that water, and you can tell the difference.
Yeah, maybe this is a good question to start with. Jeremy asked, when you say tap water, does that mean chlorinated? Does the structured water have the same source? So I think he's asking, like in the last couple slides you showed, tap water means literally coming straight from the tap, and structured water means tap water coming from that same place, but running through the device. That's correct?
That is correct. It's the water that you turn on your faucet if you have a greenhouse operation. You're turning on the water. It's from the municipal water supply. And one is just fed directly through the hose from the hose, garden hose to your plants like you normally water. The other one is passing through a structured water device and you're watering your plants. There's no other treatment involved.
And in your case there, is it already dechlorinated or is it coming from the
No,
well?
it's just whatever comes out, it's chlorinated.
Yeah.
Now
Okay.
we have a winery here. They have a dechlorination device in the winery. So I mean, we could add that to the greenhouse. But that's not what we've done.
Yeah.
Yep.
Um, the next question was, can we emulate rainfall? As in, can we make up a batch of water that has the characteristics of rainfall? And I know you didn't touch on this in the question, but rainfall, because of lightning, often has some weak nitric acids in it, correct?
Well, true. Now, so this gets into, well, I guess we'll just jump to that one, which is there is a thing called plasma activated water. One of the companies that was had a trade show booth up there last year was Fertile Current. I think they'll be, no, I'm sorry, Green Lightning
Green lightning.
here in Kentucky. They'll probably be back this year. They're working with farmers to create plasma activated water. It creates natural nitrates in the water, just same way lightning after a thunderstorm, it's really long-term observation that crops green up, even pastures will green up after a thunderstorm, and that's basically lightning charging water molecules.
Yeah. Um, and then kind of another fundamental question is, what's the best way to measure the charge or the structure of the water?
So now that's a challenging one because some of the work that's going on in the biofield area is not something that you can just take a meter and plug in and measure things. So there's a couple ways I can describe this. So one of the common things that's done with biofield research is indirect measurements. So for example, you create structured water or you are doing some kind of biofield treatment and then you take blood from somebody and you take different human dynamic parameters and you measure them and you compare people that are untreated and treated. So those are indirect measurements. There are some EMF field meters that you can kind of measure some things that those can be helpful. And besides that, you're talking about getting into extremely expensive instrumentation to do anything measuring like that. But believe it or not, one of the really handy tools is a pendulum to do dowsing. And humans are very, very perceptive. We have crystals in our ears and brains, and we can just pick up frequencies. And so if you just use pendulum dowsing, you can easily detect differences in before and after water treatments. That's for sure. And that's one of the tricks that we actually use, is to do that with fruit juice or water or whatever you taste before you treat it, and then you taste it again. But you can
Yeah,
measure that with the pendulum easily.
yeah, I highly recommend Gerald Pollack's The Fourth Phase of Water. You mentioned it. It's very readable, but he doesn't. There's no structured water meter that he uses. I mean, they're learning all this through laboratory experiments and you know
Again, very expensive instrumentation and methods. Too
yeah
too too wonky for the average person to have access to.
yeah yeah. Um, this is a water question. It's a little bit different than what we've been talking about, but can you explain the role of beavers in riparian zones?
Okay, sure. So let's make an analogy from beavers to keyline agriculture. And that's where people will measure the contours of sloping land, and they'll build like a swale or a sort of a ditch. And the concept is, when the water is moving down slope, is you're slowing it, spreading it, and so the water can sink in. And that's similar to what beavers are doing, is they're slowing the water down by creating these beaver dams. And then the water can spread, it can slow down, and it can sink into the soil, infiltrate into the soil, and replenish the aquifers. So both of these have really big effects. And Mark Shepard, who will he'll be at the Acres Conference,
Mhm.
has written about restoration agriculture, and essentially he's an expert at keyline design. So I was on a property, helped him actually do this, where we flagged off the contours and did all this. So it's really very interesting.
Yep, great. Couple other questions about structured water. And these are questions that folks asked when they signed up, which are great. If you have other ones that you're thinking of right now, please go ahead and type those into either the chat or the Q&A. How does structured water allow for reduced chemical usage on the farm?
Yeah, that's a really good possibility. Um, that I'll say is one of many things that you can do in regenerative ag and eco ag and holistic agriculture. Everything is cumulative. It's like they call them many little hammers. So, and we also have this term called the cropping system effect. The cropping system effect is when you are doing cover crops and compost, and maybe you're doing multi-species cover crops. Maybe you're doing multi-species cover crops with grazing and compost and intercropping and increasing biodiversity. So it's not just one of those that is enabling the farm to be healthier. The soil's healthier, the plants are healthier, more resilient to pests, therefore thereby reducing the need for pesticide application. So structured water be just another version of that. So again, if you're increasing the vitality of the living system, to put in perspective, when we looked at the seedlings that that had greater fresh weights, simply, I mean, this is just 15 days after they were sown. You could already tell the difference in the fresh weights and by looking at the seedlings. And so what structured water is doing, because of it's rearranged, it is being more easily assimilated into the cellular structure and influencing cellular metabolism. So it happens very fast. It happens at an incredible, micro nanoscale. And yeah, we're just taking advantage of this. This growing field is called quantum biology. And so Paul, let me just jump back to another thing that we've talked about in the past, is that one of the things that I came up along with the three pillars of eco-agriculture is the concept of these different eras. So, we had the Industrial Revolution, the chemical era was going, people were figuring out how atoms work. Then after World War II, a lot of these soldiers got their GI Bill, and earned their college degrees and became professors. When I went to college in the 1970s, a lot of my professors had come out of World War II. And a lot of these people grew up on farms, like down in the South. They were out there with the family hoeing weeds. And what they were promoting herbicides and these chemicals in agriculture because they were trying to remove the drudgery of farming for families. It was like a real gift to farmers to have the ability to control pests with chemicals. So that is what I call the chemical era. We've got really deep and sophisticated knowledge about chemicals now. And then in the 1980s and 90s, the soil biology era really started getting going. And so that's when we had the soil food web came out in the 1990s. We added that to the list of the soil testing labs. So now you could send your soil sample and have it analyzed for soil food web. And then that has expanded. Now we have the Haney soil test, and we have actually metagenomic soil testing now. So we've gone from the knowledge that mycorrhizae is a symbiotic fungi to the new concept that rhizophagy is a whole way of the rhizosphere to directly munch on microbes and extract minerals, nutrients from them. So the soil biology eras, we're still in that era, and it's expanding and growing. And what I'm saying is that the era of quantum biology, or the subtle energy era, started a long time ago. It's still slowly catching on, but it's happening faster. More people are realizing some of these facts. Some of the holistic medicine people are referring to it, and people are catching on. I think it's going to grow more rapidly, and it's going to have wider acceptance.
Yeah, thanks. I think that's a really helpful framework to understand the different eras. Great. A couple other questions. Lots of questions on structured water, heavy water, or heavy water, structured water, fourth phase of water. How does water structure differ in water? I think this means in water that has heavy bicarbonates or sodium. So I think the question is, if you are trying to structure, is it more difficult to structure water that's coming from a high bicarbonate source?
Sure. Yeah. So, well, I was down in Texas, doing soil consultancy down there. We definitely had high carbonate waters, and sometimes we had some salty waters that we had to add. We had to add gypsum back to offset that. So, and that's real common in Western agriculture, is to use gypsum for that purpose. So, yes, I'm gonna say it's probably gonna be helpful. I just don't know the specifics. Since that's a technical question, I'd probably have to refer to Dr. Google, and look up some papers to answer that technically. Yep.
No, that's fine. I know John Kemp recommends, RO whenever you can. And it seems like if you're putting water through a system to like an RO filter, you might as well structure it at the same time.
That's
And
true.
then
Now
the next,
I can throw that out. That's for sure. I mean, especially if you're doing spray tanks for either pesticide uh, applications, or you're doing some kind of a foliar spray, RO water is really good. And we already I can answer that question. We already know that there's one of the companies, Personova. We've already know that they've done RO water plus their structured water gets really good results.
yeah. Uh, and then does dynamic or structured water also influence results on a saturated paste test? So I think the question is, if you've got structured water, is that going to influence your soil test?
And it's possible. I don't know. Let me just jump over to another example. There was another paper, and this one wasn't coming out of a journal, but this was like a farmer paper, and I saved it. And what they did was they were working with compost teas, and they made compost teas with regular water. Then they made the compost tea with structured water that's been energized. They got the lab results back, and the biology was greater in the structured water.
Yeah, it would make sense. I mean, I don't know how easy it is to test, but we think that all the water that's in the sap in trees and probably in our blood is all structured. So, that would make sense. Um, Next question. This was asked before the webinar, so it just was, how many ways can structured water be effectively produced? You mentioned a couple of devices
So
you're
that
using, but were there any
right,
others?
right. So yeah, so that's why I have all these different terms, because different people are using different methods. Like magnetized water is actually probably the oldest and most widely adapted method. It's a form of structuring water. It's very, very simple to use magnets to structure water. And there's companies that sell these devices that go on garden hoses or on, like I said, on 6-inch or 12-inch irrigation pipes. So there's a number of interesting ways to do this. There's different, and I'll probably try to do this at the lecture in December, but there's various patterns that what I call broadcast patterns. They're geometric shapes that look like spirals and, different things. And simply setting the water on top of this kind of design and letting it sit there for 30 seconds and it'll imprint that information into the water. And yeah, I like myself. For my audience and for what I'm interested in devices that cost less than $100, $300, $500. So if I can find something like that and can use it, then that's what I'm promoting.
Yeah, great. Then the next question is not necessarily a structured water question, but have you ever used DMSO in a plant or any other types of uh, aids for nutrient absorption or
And I have not.
okay, right.
Did they know anything? Maybe they
I
should.
don't know.
We should find out. Huh?
Yeah, I don't know. But I guess that is another kind of general question. When you're applying a foliar, do you add a surfactant? Do you add some humic acid or folic acid or fulvic acid or
Oh yeah, yeah, that's really common. That's a whole nother topic, but yeah, that's the way to
you're right.
craft. That's the way to do the design, a custom design of foliar, and to
Right.
understand like what time of the growing season and what is, what you're trying to do is the custom blending. It's the same thing with fertigation or a biospray that you're going to mix up with biology and humic acid and molasses and things that you're going to spray on the soil. It's the same thing with doing for a
Hmm.
foliar on plants. Sometimes they're not that
Hmm.
greatly different, but yeah. There's
Yeah.
and this going back to eco agriculture, this knowledge base is really sophisticated.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, we have two more questions. So if anyone has any more, they can go ahead and add that in. But this is more just a question about suggestions for water access. He says he doesn't have any well, no city water, average rainfall less than 12 inches. A stream is 1 mile away with access. Neighbors who are drilling wells have low success. Do you have any suggestions besides rainwater harvesting?
Does for just getting access to water or in
I think it's
general?
just for getting access to water. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. One more topic that I think one of the things so is atmospheric moisture condensation.
Hmm.
They look like actually it's an old Boy Scout technique or an old survivor technique where you dig a hole in the ground and you have some plastic and you arrange it a certain way and the moisture will condense. And at the bottom of the hole, you have like a tube and you have a gallon drinking water bottle. And so, you can accumulate enough condensated moisture to have drinking water. So then there's some companies that are selling these units. They're about the size of a small refrigerator. But this is very interesting. It goes back probably thousands of years, this technology, if you check into it. And I think it has some merit in dry land areas.
Hmm. Yeah, great. Yeah, I think I've seen
And then
something on
another
YouTube
thing,
like that.
just another thing, we see this all the time out here. We just went through one of the most, in fact, the most extreme dry period on record. It was here in Kentucky, but it was probably similar to a lot of other places. In July, August, and September, we had the driest period ever recorded. But we had cover crops in the ground. And what you see is that overnight the condensation collects on the leaves. You go out there in the morning, you walk around, your shoes are wet. And so you have condensation, it's running down the stems. It actually is feeding the roots. So some species are more adapted to that. In an arid area, another thing is shade. It's very important. So that's where, you know, not sure where he's at and what he's trying to do, but even out in Arizona, it was in where, it's really, really obvious that trees create shade, and and then from there you can have understory. You can create these little plant guilds. So these are all techniques for dryland areas.
Yeah, great. Excuse me. Obviously, I need some more water. I'm getting over a cold here. Last question. Are there other excuse me, practical resources like Hugh Lovell's mapping of biodynamics to minerals and energies?
Are there practical resources? Yes, there are a bunch. Too many to list in one place. Um, yeah, like I said, the field goes back a long way. So in, let's say, the 20th century, starting, at the beginning of the 1900s, there was a whole movement around both biodynamics in Europe, and that's where Lily Kalisko's work was done. But here in the United States is, this work on bioenergetics and human health and agriculture started, way back then too. So there's a lot to draw from.
Yeah, great. And at your presentation at our conference last year, you had a real nice resource list that folks can actually get access to that. You did an article, excuse me, and it is in you wrote an article for our October issue, but this was from before that.
Yeah,
It
so
was
last year I was speaking about biofertilizers, and I had I don't know, it's like a 6 or 8 page
right.
handout on biofertilizers that, kind of framed the whole thing. I was considering putting something like this together on energy, but it would end up being like 20 pages or something. It's so in
Yeah.
depth, but I may have to have like a, front and back handout with some of the suppliers that I'm referring to. Yeah.
Yeah, folks can go back to the June issue of Acres USA magazine and see that. It was an excerpt from your conference talk, and there's a link in there to get the handout. So,
Yeah.
um,
So
all right.
I do want to emphasize that really, we have to be practical minded. We're farmers, and so, in my other articles, I emphasize that carbon farming really builds the habitat, and the microbes come and they do their work. You can also then brew it and spread it with biofertilizers. You can really enhance the microbiome effect. And you have minerals and mineral balancing knowledge and sap analysis knowledge to tweak the minerals that the plants need, which are the skeletal structure and the enzyme. They're cofactors for enzymatic reactions and so forth. But this third leg is it's been around a long time. We know a lot about it. There's a lot published on this. The body of knowledge is vast. But yeah, it's getting more and more practical. You have to use some discernment and have to have some ability to discern, kind of just like marketing hype versus something that's worthwhile. And the other thing is that it's really a very small, effect, but it can have some in other words, it's not a bazooka. When you have 10 tons of compost, you're getting a big push. The subtle energy part is working on a much finer plane. So you're trying to increase that vitality. But what I'm saying is that it can be the icing on the cake. It can be the silver lining to pull it all together. And in some instances, there's people who work in pest control, really difficult pests. They're not able to get that pest control until they reach into the energetics toolbox.
Great, fascinating subject, and like you said, I think we're going to be learning a lot more about this in coming years. So, thanks again, Steve. Again, Steve will be presenting more on this topic at our conference, and others will as well. And we will be sending out an email with the link to this presentation on our YouTube page. And thanks again for being here. And Steve, we'll see you in a couple months.
All right. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.